All right, so this is a kidney, and before we get started, I just want to recap that the kidney basically filters all of your blood and other fluids of your body, and then it creates urine, which it would then eventually bring down to the bladder for you to urinate and get rid of all of that. They're located on the posterior side of your body, so they're behind all of your digestive organs, and they would actually be kind of on your back side, back here, one on each side. So sometimes if something's going wrong with your kidneys, you'll get like a referred pain. So that pain would be felt in your low back region because that's where the kidneys are kind of located. So the first thing to talk about is the hilum, the renal hilum. So if you remember, the lungs had a hilum too. So it's the same concept here where we have the veins and the artery, and this is the ureter, going in to the kidney. So this whole thing right here would be the hilum of the kidney. So renal hilum is right there. And then when you look at the kidney, it has this nice backside. So what we can't see here is the renal fascia, which would be kind of laying, I don't know how to show you, here we go. Renal fascia, which would be just kind of hovering on the outside here. And then you'd have this adipose layer right inside. So adipose tissue would be in the middle. And then we have the renal capsule, and that's what you can see on this model. So this is the renal capsule, this dark brown. Really quickly, we'll go through this too. So I mentioned that this whole thing is the hilum. So I just want to make sure you guys know that this is the renal artery, which is red, renal vein in blue, and then the ureter is what you see coming off here, which would go all the way down into the bladder. Okay, so we talked about, we have the renal capsule on the outside, and then renal cortex is the next thing. So now we're inside the kidney. This is the renal cortex. So all of this kind of bright pink color, it travels all the way down. And then the renal medulla. So the renal medulla is like this inside layer, and it has three parts. So I'll mention those three parts. So this triangle shape is the renal pyramids. So renal pyramid here, all of these. And then you have renal columns, and the renal columns are between the pyramids. So that's where you see the pink kind of peeking between renal columns. And then renal papilla. So the renal papilla are just the very like points of those triangles here. Renal papilla, each one of those. The papilla have papillary ducts, which isn't actually visual on this model, I guess. So they would just be like little holes, little openings at the ends of each of these renal papillas. Let's see. The next part is our renal sinus, which has also three parts. So the renal sinus would be this whole thing, but the three parts are the minor calyx, which would be just that little cup that's going around the papilla. This is the minor calyx, and then they would drain into the major calyxes, which are coming kind of on the outside. So this whole thing is where the minors would drain into, so this is called the major calyx. And if it's helpful to think of it kind of like streams, little baby streams coming into a big river, and eventually that river goes into like the ocean down here. So this part down here, that ocean, would be the renal pelvis. So it's where all of the fluid drains into, and eventually renal pelvis all the way down to the ureter and into the bladder. I want to show you guys on this model too, it's really essentially the same. The ureter is a little better and the renal pelvis is a little better. So again, you have those minor calyces, minor, draining into a major calyx, which would be this part. And then the renal pelvis, which is really well depicted here because it's still hollow. And you can see how that would go down into the ureter, which is down here. And it's easier to see from the backside. So that's the ureter. Let's see. And then the cortex on this guy is a little easier to see as well. So this is the cortex with the renal pyramids and all of that. The last thing on your guys' structure list is nephrons. They are a really small structure. These are called nephron loops, all these little yellow things that you see, the squiggles, and they are there for filtering fluid and making urine, basically. So that's what those are. This model is the only one we have that shows those. And that's everything.